CGTN.
Yeah, so if anyone just happens to have at least $10,000 to send over, that would be lovely. Could be put to great use.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
At least 5 Nigerian soldiers killed in jihadist attack on military base. UN Secretary General calls for an end to hate-based violence. And aid agencies struggle to deliver aid to affected areas in Mozambique. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Karen Roberts, live in Nairobi. Rama joins me now with all your business headlines.
Thank you very much, Karen. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. The African Continental Free Trade Area finally gets enough signatories to come into force. And South African Airways has agreed with its bankers to a massive debt rollover. We'll have the details on that and plenty more in the course of the hour. For now, though, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Karen.
Thank you very much, Rama. Well, let's begin in Nigeria, where military sources have confirmed the deaths of 5 soldiers in a suspected Boko Haram attack. Scores of others have been injured and are missing. Monday's incident comes days after Islamic State in West Africa Province, or ISWAP, attacked yet another base in Borno State and seized weapons before withdrawing. Over 20,000 people have died and over 1 million others have been displaced since the Boko Haram uprising in 2009. Well, let's get you more on this from CGTN's Phil Ehaza, who is in Abuja for us. Phil, what more can you tell us about the Boko Haram attack on a military base in which 5 soldiers have been killed?
Well, thank you, Karen. What we know for now is that there was an attack over the weekend. That's about 4 days ago, on the 26th of April, in the Borno State area. That's the Maraba Kimba area of Borno State. It was an attack on a military formation there, a part of the Lafia Dole operation to wipe out the remnants of the Boko Haram members. Now, sources, although the official statement has not come from the military officials, but sources there and some military sources also revealed that over 15 gun trucks from the militants there attacked the military base. Although there was resistance from the military, they overrun them, cutting away ammunition, arsenals and firepower from that base. And also about 26 of them were killed in that attack, or rather 5 of them were killed, 8 of them injured, and then about 30 of them still missing. They've not reported to base, but we cannot really confirm this until, as due process demands, that we listen or hear the official reports from the military.
So this attack took place 4 days ago. There are other reports that Boko Haram fighters killed 21 people when they stormed into a village in northeastern Nigeria and set it on fire. What's the latest that you have on this?
Well, in the case of Adamawa State, you would see that it's more like a coordinated attack. One 4 days, and then the 26th, and the other just yesterday, 3 days away, 7 p.m. Local time here, which happened in Adamawa State. Now, Adamawa State, that's the Madagali local government area. It borders Borno State and the Sambisa Forest. Sambisa Forest has been known as the hideout of the militant sect. And then according to reports, in fact, the police spokesperson there, Othman Abubakar, has confirmed the attack, but not the number of casualties. But other sources, including a chieftain in the local government area, confirmed that lots of motorcycles drove into the local government area with militants, and they carted away food supplies. They burnt the villages, the homes, the shops, razed them down, and killed several people. If you look at the two attacks, you tell that they were coordinated, one for firepower and the other for food supplies.
Phil, these attacks are happening on a regular basis. What is the government doing to help improve insecurity in northeastern Nigeria?
Well, it's a bit worrying. It's just that, if you look at the past few weeks, the Boko Haram sect has really not made the headlines as much as it used to make at some certain times, until the government increased efforts around that area. Also, for the fact that Nigeria generally has been, I won't want to use the word distracted, but has been bedeviled by lots of killings, kidnappings, and banditry in different parts of the country. So that might also be the reason why such news from that area has been suppressed. But it is, just yesterday on Monday, there was the 55th anniversary of the Nigeria Air Force, and then the Vice President, who is also acting in the capacity of the President is not around at the moment. He's on a private visit to UK. He also commended the military, commended the Air Force for their progress, and also reassured Nigerians and the military of the fact that dozens of Super Tucano aircraft are coming into the country by 2020, just a year away from now, and also assured the military that the country is making progress, and they should exert more excellence and professionalism in their fight against insurgency. But apart from these assurances, it's the residents and citizens in those areas are still living in fear, and we just hope that something is done to wipe out these remnants of Boko Haram sect in the near future.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. That was CGTN's Phil Ehaza there on the latest Boko Haram attacks in northeastern Nigeria. Meanwhile, Nigeria's Air Force has received 2 new military-grade helicopters during celebrations to mark the country's 55th independence anniversary in the capital, Abuja. The Augusta helicopters are part of air power upgrades which Nigeria has put in place to combat widespread security threats. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has more.
A show of force by one of the most important arms of Nigeria's military, the Air Force. Founded in 1964, the Air Force has become one of Nigeria's most effective armies in combating wide-ranging security threats, including terrorism in the Northeast. What is seen here has been built from a few trainers and transport aircrafts at inception. The Nigerian Air Force is now one of the most prolific in Africa, comprising diverse aircrafts capable of executing more complex operations.
The growth of Nigerian Air Force since the inception of the service has been particularly outstanding. From having only a few trainers and transport aircraft in the early years of the service, the Nigerian Air Force currently has an impressive overt comprising diverse aircraft with capabilities to perform a wide spectrum of missions.
The Air Force has been at the forefront of President Buhari's war against ISIL affiliates Boko Haram. In the past 4 years, he has spent billions of dollars weaponizing the force with modern aircrafts and conducted several specialized trainings from foreign armies like the US and Britain. At the climax of the 55-year anniversary, 2 more aircrafts were added to its growing fleet. The army is also expecting to take deliveries of 12 Super Tucano warplanes from the US in 2020.
In these last 4 years, the Air Force has acquired and reactivated several aircrafts, which are now helping to make a difference in the various theaters of engagement across the country. In addition, the procurement process for military hardware has been reviewed to remove inefficiency. In 2018, through a transparent, first-of-its-kind government-to-government deal with the United States of America, we concluded the procurement process for the delivery in 2020 of a dozen Super Tucano aircraft, which will no doubt be game-changing for Nigeria's air capabilities.
55 years on, and Nigeria's Air Force is still evolving, but it's building its capacity to respond effectively to wide-ranging security challenges, ranging from counter-terrorism in the northeast to escalating wave of attacks by armed gangs in the northwest. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Still on security matters, days after attacks on churches in Sri Lanka and Burkina Faso, the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres is calling for an end to hate-based violence. As Daniel Arapmoy reports, Guterres also announced that the UN is devising mechanisms for curbing hate speech.
The Easter Sunday bombings in Sri Lanka, which targeted churches and high-end hotels, killed over 250 people. Weeks later, another attack happened in Burkina Faso, in which a priest and 4 worshippers were killed. On March 15th, a brazen attack on mosque in New Zealand's Christchurch town was another reminder on the reality of hate-based violence. A violence that rides on religion, sectarianism, race and even ethnicity. One which the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres is now condemning.
Around the world, we are seeing a disturbing groundswell of intolerance and hate-based violence targeting worshippers of many faiths. In recent days, a synagogue in the United States and a church in Burkina Faso have come under attack. Such incidents have become all too familiar. Muslims gunned down in mosques, their religious sites vandalized, Jews murdered in synagogues, their gravestones defaced with swastikas, Christians killed at prayers, and their churches often torched. Houses of worship, instead of the safe havens they should be, have become targets.
According to Guterres, the internet is fast becoming a platform of propagating hate speech whose devastating effects are now being felt across the world.
Parts of the internet are becoming hothouses of hate, as like-minded bigots find each other online and platforms serve to inflame and enable hate to go viral. As crime feeds on crime, as vile views move from the fringes to the mainstream, the Secretary-General is profoundly concerned that we are nearing a pivotal moment in battling hatred and extremism.
In conjunction with the High Representatives for the Alliance of Civilizations, Miguel Angel Moratinos, the UN will work with governments and civil societies in fostering values that ensure world peace. Daniel Arapmoy, CGTN.
Meanwhile, the leader of the terrorist group ISIL, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, says the Easter Sunday bombings in Sri Lanka were his organization's revenge for losses in its last territorial stronghold of Baghuz in Syria. It's believed to be Baghdadi's first appearance in 5 years in a propaganda video. He also congratulated militant groups in Burkina Faso and Mali for pledging allegiance to ISIL, urging them to intensify attacks. His statements have confirmed fears of ISIL's growing presence in Africa. The group is competing for dominance and followers in the region. It thrives in countries afflicted by civil unrest, poor governance and religious tensions, challenges faced by many African countries. Some factions of militant groups in Africa, like Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab, have pledged allegiance to ISIL. The group is also active in Tunisia, Libya and Egypt. Well, to discuss this further, we are now joined by Abdelmonem Al Said, chairman of Al Masri Al Publishing House in Cairo. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Al Said. It seems that this video is authentic, although crucially we don't know where it was made. How has Baghdadi managed to evade capture for so long?
ICL is very
Oh, do continue. Mr. Al Said, we can hear you.
I hear the first part of the question, and I guess it's related to how we are now sure that Mr. Baghdadi is the one that claims he is. And if I may answer that by saying, ISIS is a very skillful organization. It's a global organization. It's highly organized and highly financed and highly committed to what they claim as their cause. And I believe they could. And they succeeded in actually smuggling their leader, despite of, at the time, was American bombardment of the place he was in it. And that gave us the signal that terrorism is still probably lost a battle in Syria and Iraq, but they didn't lose the war, at least yet. And as your introduction and the early recording, you showed how far they have gone into sub-Saharan Africa and in North Africa and in all the Asian countries. So ISIS will be with us for a while until there is a global coalition will be capable of fighting it and defeating it once for good.
Mr. Al Said, there's growing concern that this 3-week-old conflict in Libya will allow groups such as Islamic State to take advantage of the power vacuum there. What steps would you say need to be taken to ensure that this does not happen?
I think is to support the Libyan National Army. The Libyan National Army is capable of doing that job and filling the space. So far, the international community is not really relying on the power of the Libyan National Army, and I guess providing it with arms and training and helping with intelligence information that this possibility that ISIS and probably Al-Qaeda also might fill the space there can be prevented. It should be by a common effort within the African countries and also the international community.
Okay, thank you very much for your analysis. That was Mr. Abdelmonem Al Said, chairman of Al Masri Al Publishing House in Cairo. Moving on to other news now, Mozambique, the country's northeast, is dealing with the aftermath of Cyclone Kenneth. The death toll has risen to 38, with aid agencies struggling to deliver aid as flooding makes areas inaccessible. Astatal has more.
In the space of little over a month, Mozambique has borne the brunt of 2 cyclones. Cyclone Kenneth hit northern Mozambique, destroying roads and homes. The United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is trying to deliver aid to the port town of Pemba, located in the country's northeastern region.
The supplies that were trying to come in couldn't land because of the rains, and this is something that's going to be a challenge in this operation for the days ahead, because the forecast is that we will continue to have rains for at least the coming days. So we are looking at how we manage this. We're looking at all of the options to get supplies in.
As floodwaters continue to rise due to heavy rain, authorities worry the death toll could rise as well. Authorities are also prepping for a potential cholera outbreak after some wells were contaminated.
With the rains, we had to reactivate the cholera treatment center in Pemba. We will start to assemble the center and bring water treatment devices.
Cyclone Kenneth partially or fully destroyed an estimated 35,000 buildings or homes.
So the major needs that have been generated by Cyclone Kenneth are shelter. So what we saw out there when we flew over these villages that were impacted was entire villages that have been flattened. So people desperately need shelter to be protected, in particular because the rains continue to fall.
Aid agencies are calling for urgent life-saving aid as Mozambique deals with the devastation of Cyclone Idai and Kenneth. Astatal, CGTN.
We are going to a short break. Don't go away, lots more to come, including UNHCR, Libyan and Italian governments evacuate 146 refugees. WHO in efforts to reverse resurgence of measles in Africa.
For look at some economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
Reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's head to North Africa, where 146 refugees have been evacuated from Libya to Italy in a joint operation between UNHCR, Italian and Libyan authorities. This comes amid an increase in fighting in and around the capital, Tripoli. Here's Daniel Arapmoy with more on that.
A group of 146 refugees landed in Rome after being evacuated from detention centers in Tripoli by the UN Refugee Agency and Libyan authorities. Ongoing fighting in the Libyan capital is posing an increasing threat to more than 3,300 refugees and migrants still trapped in detention near the front lines.
As you know, 3,300 more persons are in very, very difficult situations. As the High Commissioner has called upon governments to let them know, this is a good beginning. We hope that this will follow up by other governments, and more people can be brought to safety and their dignity can be restored.
Italy is the first country to have come forward to accept evacuees from Libya since the recent violence began. UNHCR Chief Filippo Grandi said it was crucial that other states match Italy's gesture in other evacuation places. The refugee agency urged the international community to evacuate all refugees who remain inside detention centers in Tripoli and to bring them to safety. But with clashes appearing set to continue, time is of the essence. The group that arrived in Rome flew out of Libya's Misrata airport and will be hosted in emergency accommodation centers in Italy. Among them are 46 children who are separated from their families. Daniel Arapmoy, CGTN.
The World Health Organization is warning of an increase in cases of measles around the world. At least 9 countries in the African region have experienced a resurgence of measles in the last 12 months. They include Cameroon, Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, Guinea, Madagascar, Mali, Nigeria and Uganda. CGTN's Coletta Wanjoe spoke to Dr. Agre Batagereza, Health Emergencies Team Leader at the WHO.
After some time of continuous vaccinating of children, I think people stopped valuing now the vaccine. They took it for granted. And even you had the naysayers about the vaccine who were even saying vaccine is causing some diseases like Asperger's syndrome and the like. And they stopped vaccinating their children. So now vaccination rate, the number of children who were vaccinated started going down.
If we zero down to Africa, we have about 9 countries or so that have been outlined by WHO as having alarming cases of measles outbreak. But in some of these countries, for example, Uganda, they have established health systems.
The health system is okay. However, despite that, you need to have strong political commitment. You need, again, political commitment can be there, but goes with financial commitment. So financial commitment needs to be there. Now you need the system that will hold to ensure that vaccine, you don't have a stock out of the vaccine. And vaccine, when they come, you need to maintain that cold chain to the last mile, to the last child in the last level of vaccination. Now, whenever there's any breakage of all this system, as I mentioned, then you happen to have cases of missed out children.
Countries like Ethiopia, where we are now, are not amongst the vulnerable countries for now, but there are still reports that there are annual outbreaks of measles in the country.
Ethiopia, from time, had improved in their vaccination coverage. However, they have not reached where you expect. And that's why you still find some cases of measles in the country. Even as we talk now, there are measles infection circulating within the community. But all of it the same, as I said, starting when you have a breakage in this complete chain or system, as I mentioned.
Ethiopia has just launched the second measles vaccine second dose. How vital is this?
To ensure that children are even more protected, Ethiopia has introduced a policy that children at the second year to get a second dose of measles vaccination. So this has been introduced in the government guidelines and in the routine vaccination that is ongoing. So a child will get his first measles at 9 months, and then at second year, a child will get that booster dose to ensure that there's that strong coverage among a child and no child is missed out.
In Algeria, the country's former Prime Minister Ahmed Ouyahia appeared before court in a corruption probe. The court will decide whether Ouyahia will face formal charges and head to trial. Here's more.
Ahmed Ouyahia, Algeria's former prime minister, joins a list of powerful figures to face judicial investigations into alleged corruption. The ex-prime minister made his appearance before court as part of the corruption probe. Algeria's finance minister and at least 5 tycoons have been implicated in the probe. A court will decide whether there is enough evidence for Ouyahia to face a formal charge and trial. Protesters have already made up their minds about his culpability.
We are asking the court to sentence him to prison. He must go to prison. He must go to Al-Harash prison.
We have come here to demand that the judges hold Ouyahia accountable for his crimes. I need to see him with my own eyes in Al-Harak prison.
Protests erupted in Algeria, calling for President Abdelaziz Bouteflika's resignation. Bouteflika resigned on April 2nd, but protests continue against what some deem the old guard. Algeria is set to hold presidential elections on July 4th. Astatal, CGTN.
46 artists from across Africa and China are showcasing their work at a Belt and Road Afro-Sino art exhibition being held in Harare in Zimbabwe. It's the second edition of the art exchange. The first was held in Beijing last year.
Running under the theme South Meets East, the exhibition features over 120 art pieces and will be open to the public for 3 days. The event is providing yet another way to break down cultural barriers.
It just takes a very courageous person to walk to a stranger and say, hey, how are you? What's your name? Can I be your friend? It's very difficult. So Afro-Sino Cultural Exchange Association came into being to break this ice. We look at ourselves as a bridge, some common ground that is light. When the Chinese comes in, he finds he has a friend already. When an African comes on board, he finds he has a friend already.
It's a language that's understood universally, that's already helped connect two different worlds, Africa and China. Now, art is set to shine the spotlight on and advance an initiative that will take the relationship to a higher level. Several African states will get huge investments in infrastructure and other development projects under the Belt and Road Initiative. The arts sector will also reap the dividends through unprecedented exposure.
It's going to help me to create more networks with artists from the eastern side of the globe. And besides just that, it's also creating an environment for me to learn the different cultures, because we are about 46 artists and we have different backgrounds, we have different cultures, and we're trying to meet together. Like tomorrow there's going to be a forum where we're going to be networking and just seeing how we can best improve our art practice.
An arts workshop is being held along the sidelines of the exhibition, where several pieces of art on display will be auctioned to raise money for a culture fund to promote upcoming artists. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Families of Canadians killed in the Ethiopian Airlines crash in March have filed a lawsuit against Boeing in Chicago. Attorneys contend that Boeing rushed the MAX 8 to production prematurely in order to compete with rival Airbus and sidestepped safety guidelines in order to reduce cost. Boeing's fast-selling 737 MAX was grounded worldwide in March following the Ethiopian Airlines crash that killed all 157 on board. Boeing says that it's making steady progress to certify its grounded 737 MAX jets with a software update and has completed a final flight test prior to the certification flight.
Those 6 minutes will forever be embedded in my mind. I was not there to help them. I couldn't save them. It was up to Boeing and the others in charge to save them. We paid for a safe flight, but instead my family and others in that plane have suffered a profound loss that can never be mended. We are here to ensure that planes remain flyable and safe for human beings, that no lives are lost, again because of the negligence of plane manufacturers and aviation regulators, that no one leaves this earth in such a tragic and painful manner.
Let's now go to Rama for all the latest business news. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Here's what's coming up in business. The African Continental Free Trade Area finally has enough signatories to come into force. And South African Airways and its lenders have agreed to an enormous debt rollover. Details on that coming up in a bit.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start on the continental trade front. The African Union announced barely 24 hours ago that it had received 2 ratifications from Sierra Leone and the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. In effect, the Union now has met the threshold for the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. This deal, of course, does aim to create a single continental market for goods and services with free movement of business persons and investment as well. It will also boost the establishment of a continental customs union and eventually an African customs union as well. Now, the agreement is expected to create a market of about 1 billion people, combined GDP of about $2.6 trillion US. Countries that have ratified the agreement include Ghana, Kenya, Rwanda and South Africa. Speaking of South Africa, the state-owned carrier over there has reached an agreement in principle with its lenders to roll over $640 million of debt. Effectively, that should give SAA a bit of room to execute a turnaround plan that's aimed at weaning the airline of government-funded bailouts. President Cyril Ramaphosa has made a point of supporting ailing state-owned entities like SAA and Eskom, which survive at this point in time on handouts from taxpayers. But the extent of their financial difficulties has meant very slow progress is being made in turning them around. The state carrier hasn't made a profit since 2011. It's drawn up a 5-year turnaround plan that includes cutting costs and cancelling unprofitable routes. On to healthcare issues. April is World Autism Month, while the United Nations sanctioned World Autism Awareness Day is celebrated on the 2nd of April. Autism-friendly events and educational activities take place throughout the month to increase understanding and acceptance and foster support. In Kenya, the Pan-African Congress on Autism held a conference in the Kenyan capital. CGTN's Alexander Majala was there.
Autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, is a neurological development disorder that impacts the ability of an individual to interact and communicate with others. The condition is characterized by impaired social interaction and communication, as well as restricted and repetitive behavior. In Kenya, there's not a lot of awareness on the condition. That's why the Pan-African Congress on Autism has held a summit to educate people about ASD. PACA partnered with Step Up for Autism, an organization that creates awareness and provides support for autistic people and their families.
We create awareness forever. I don't know, years and years, but what are we doing?
Many non-profit organizations are urging the Kenyan government to make changes in the education sector to accommodate children in the spectrum as well as others with special needs. The NGOs are also calling for financial support.
It's really expensive to have them go for therapies. So if the government will chip in with their NHIF and try and make therapies as cheap as possible.
According to experts, there are 3 kinds of autism. They are autistic disorder, also referred to as classic autism, Asperger's syndrome, which usually exhibits milder symptoms of autistic disorder, and pervasive developmental disorder. Many people living with the condition find it difficult to function independently and are often misunderstood.
Growing up was hard. It was difficult for my parents and relatives to understand me. When I went to the special needs school, people said I had gone mad. I wasn't happy with those comments. Then in school, my parents used to cane me so I could study. But I didn't like studying. So when I would leave school for home and go outside to play, they would punish me sometimes and even lock me inside the house.
Others, however, have chosen to embrace those in the spectrum and are helping them stand on their own 2 feet. Mwaka, for example, found that help at the Embrace Autism car wash, where he has worked for the past year. He started off as a trainee getting a $2 allowance for transport. Now as an employee, he takes home between $100 and $120 a month.
When we go look for work, employers ask for certificates and various qualifications. And we don't have anything like that. At the special needs school, there's no set dates to leave school. We leave as adults to go back home to live with our parents.
I've worked for 1 year and 4 months. Yeah. And what led me to work with people autistic, I was explained to what is autism, it's all about. We train them about time management, about responsibilities, about life skills, such things. Yeah.
While there's no cure for ASD, there's a variety of therapies to manage the condition with early diagnosis and treatment in order for those in the spectrum to lead fairly normal lives. Alexandria Majala for CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Let's head over to North Africa now. The Centre for Promotion of Exports in Tunisia is stepping up efforts to prevent the repercussions of a no-deal Brexit on the country's exports to the UK. Tunisia aims to develop a bilateral free trade agreement with the UK later on. With the details on that story, here's CGTN's Adin Chouachi.
According to the report of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development published in April, Tunisia might lose over a quarter, 26% of its exports to the United Kingdom, which represents $49 million in case of no-deal Brexit.
We're expecting a negative impact in case of a no-deal Brexit. The state is in a permanent contact with the Tunisian embassy in London and the British embassy in Tunisia to put in place the right strategy and react at the right time to face this scenario.
The document, which draws up two lists of countries, the winners and the losers, specifies that the prices of Tunisia's exports to the UK will rise by 2.1%. whereas the profit margin achieved under the pan-Euro-Mediterranean system will drop by 3%.
The pan-Euro-Mediterranean system is based on a network of free trade agreements between the European Union and its partners in the Mediterranean region, including Tunisia.
Economists at the Tunisian Confederation of Businessmen Utica say the top three countries which will make the most of the no-deal Brexit are China, with an increase in exports worth over $10 billion, the United States $5.3 billion, and Japan $4.9 billion.
The European Union and Turkey will be the two big losers, with a shortfall of $35.5 billion and $2.4 billion respectively. Tunisia's approach is based on strengthening trade ties with the UK and diversifying exported goods.
At the level of the African continent, only 5 countries will make the most of the Brexit. They are South Africa with $3 billion gain, Mauritius, Botswana, Seychelles and Namibia.
Tunisian authorities plan to negotiate a free zone agreement with the UK. This bilateral agreement will be discussed by the delegations of the two countries to prevent the impact of a no-deal Brexit on exports. Adin Chouachi, CGTN, Tunis.
On the second day of the Horticultural Expo in Beijing, the city finally got some decent weather after days of strong wind and cloudy weather. The pavilion has seen a substantial increase in the number of visitors as well. The International Exhibition Hall is showcasing handicrafts, art demos, live performances from countries around the planet. Tourists heading to the different pavilions have already lined up in the peak hours in order to get in. A surge in traffic was expected since China is entering its 4-day Labor Day holiday starting on Wednesday. Singapore's Botanical Gardens has one of the world's largest collections of plants, and it's a leader in horticulture research as well. CGTN's Mirulu gives us this report.
A UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Singapore Botanic Gardens is located in the heart of the bustling city-state. Predating modern-day Singapore, it has continued to play an important role in the conservation of native flora and fauna. Over its 160-year-old history, it has evolved from a British colonial garden to a world-class scientific institution for research, conservation and education.
The Singapore Botanic Gardens was responsible for the discovery of many plants within the region. The gardens was actually one of the first institutions to use tissue culture in a very big way to propagate orchids. And so you can see the results today in the thriving orchid industry in Singapore and other parts of Southeast Asia.
Since its early years, the gardens has been in the forefront of research in botany and horticulture. One of its earliest success stories is the development of plantation rubber. The garden's first scientific director, Sir Henry Ridley, perfected the technique to extract latex without killing the tree, a method which is still used today.
At the height of the rubber industry, which also coincided with the introduction of motor cars, the Singapore Botanic Gardens actually delivered more than 900,000 seeds to various parts of the world, as far away as Egypt, and even back to rubber's own home in South America.
The gardens is home to over 50 heritage trees, Singapore's oldest ornamental swan lake, and even a ginger garden. Its newer additions include an ethnobotany garden, which studies the use of plants by traditional societies in a wetland habitat.
While most other botanic gardens focus on the conservation of individual species of plants, what we have done here is to conserve an entire ecosystem within the botanic gardens.
This Tembusu tree is over 150 years old, and it's on the $5 bill here in Singapore. Just as this iconic tree, the Singapore Botanic Gardens has stood the test of time thanks to its strong ecosystem. As a go-to place for both locals and tourists, the garden has been an integral part of Singapore's cultural heritage, a role it will continue to play in the years to come. Mira Lu, CGTN, Singapore.
Chinese brands are making a splash in New York, and they're challenging attitudes around made in China products and services. CGTN's Wang Guang has more.
From luggage made of aircraft-grade aluminum, to jewelry worn by Lady Gaga, to designer clothing with an Asian touch, and luxury watches combining Chinese craftsmanship and Swiss technology. Nearly 20 Chinese brands are here on display at Grand Central Terminal in New York, one of America's oldest and busiest train stations. China Chip Pop-Up is the exhibition's official name. Many of these luxury goods are challenging preconceptions about Chinese products here in the West.
You are certainly breaking the stereotype. These are high quality, highly produced, artistic products that anyone would like to own, if you could afford them.
Many brands come from China's fashion industry, a sector that has long been considered little more than copycat of the West. Yet the country's independent designers are looking to change that. Wang Ning is founder of Play Lounge, a leading Chinese fashion destination with over 500 designer labels. She believes the key for Chinese products to succeed in the West is not by becoming more Western.
Classical Chinese decorative fabrics featured many Chinese cultural elements. This type of fabrics and design are used by Dior, Vera Wang, and Chloé for their latest product this season. Many Western consumers actually resonate with products that have a rich cultural connotation. I definitely see a trend here, the resurgence of Chinese embroidery and decorative design.
Western brands still dominate the global market. According to a research by McKinsey in 2018, US and European fashion companies such as Nike, H&M, and Zara currently account for 97% of global profit. Chinese-American cultural icon Yu Sai-Khan, who helped organize this event, believes Chinese companies need to catch up quickly, especially in marketing and communication.
Some of the brands here, they think that they can use WeChat. In America, nobody uses WeChat. If you're going to do a business here, you better know how to do business. They have to understand what Westerners need and do, or else how do you sell to that market? So this is a very inexpensive way for them to test the market and to test themselves, actually.
Some industry experts say America's perception of China and Chinese creativity is long overdue, adding that these kind of exhibits could help America see what's really happening in China. Wang Guan, CGTN, New York.
Right, then I'll leave you there for the time being. Later on at the top of the hour, we'll be looking at what's next. What does it mean for you to have this continental free trade area in effect? It comes into effect at the end of May. There's a few things that need to happen before that point gets here. We'll have some answers for you live on the program at 1800 GMT. For now, though, back to Karen.
Thank you very much, Rama. Well, we are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including Moroccan last brocade master holds on to fading intricate art form.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
To Morocco now, and to fashion. Global production methods mean intricate and time-consuming fashion designs are gradually fading as many customers opt for a quick pick off the rack. But one brocade master weaver is holding on to this disappearing art form.
Abdelkader Awazani is the last of Morocco's brocade master weavers and has been repeating the same gestures for 63 years in his dilapidated workshop in the heart of the old city of Fes.
I was a child when I learned this profession. There were several people who did this and they taught me. They're all dead now. The people who come here to learn the craft don't stay for more than 2 to 3 months. Sometimes they last 1 to 2 years before finding this craft too complicated and then deciding to leave. That's the main problem.
The last witness of a bygone era, Abdelkader intricately creates shimmering silk fabrics enhanced with gold or silver thread for bridal jewelry and high-end furnishings.
We use several designs for our fabrics. We have several models, and everything is calculated here. It's mathematical. Those who say the opposite of that don't know anything about this craft.
His rare fabrics cost up to $560 depending on the complexity of the patterns.
The work I did with the Americans is very well known in France and was displayed at Colette Boutique in Paris. It was in this very big store.
Though the rules of the art he guards like a family secret, it is said that the ancestral know-how had its roots in the era of the Marinid sultans of the 13th century, a history that has been greatly threatened by the blow that came with industrial-scale competitors.
Nobody wants to learn this craft. There's no future in it, so nobody gives it any importance. That's all.
So with every shimmering stitch, Abdelkader holds on to an artistic history that is threatened to fade into the world of fairy tales with every passing day. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
All the sports news are coming up for you after the break, including... The world awaits Caster Semenya appeal ruling on testosterone.
Africa